Good morning, councillors, and welcome to the Planning, Economic Development and Environment Committee meeting of the 14th of March. I declare the meeting open at 9 a.m. and let me begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and their elders past, present and emerging. Before we get stuck into the agenda today, do any councillors have any declarations of conflicts of interest that they'd like to make now? Great. There being none, we'll get stuck. I'm being asked. No, we don't have any leaves of absence because all the councillors are here, but thank you. Unless someone would like to declare a leave of absence while they're present. No, didn't think so. Good, on we go. So let's get stuck into item 5.1, which is the land acquisition for environmental offsets prioritisation methodology. This is a report coming from Michael Asnikar's branch, but I believe that Trevor Knappy, Program Leader of the STARS, is going to present the report for us.
Thank you. Through the chair, we've got a quick presentation, and that will provide a bit more context in relation to the information in the report.
Do
you want us up the front?
Go up to the lectern, or from here's fine. Okay.
So we are clicking.
All right. So we'll just jump to the first slide. Oh, you've got it. All right, Jingri councillors. So today's presentation is just to provide a bit more context in relation to the report. And in relation to land acquisition, so first off, would like to clarify, so there's two main methods that we acquire land when we go out and purchase land. There are other ways that land comes into us for environmental purposes, but when we go out and purchase, it's the two main methods. So the first off is the environmental offsets purposes. And that is funded by developer contributions when they have unavoidable environmental impacts in relation to their development. So keep this in mind, this land really needs to be cleared land that has no vegetation on it or very minimal, where we can rehabilitate it and we can get a better environmental outcome from what was cleared. The second way is for conservation purposes. So that is land that already has high ecological values and it will be bushland sites. And that is funded through the environmental levy. So we're just going to talk through the environmental offsets. And I just wanted to highlight that environmental offsets is highly regulated. So there is state regulation and guidelines that really set some criteria that we must abide by when we're looking at offsets. And we deliver our offsets through our environmental management policy, Planning Scheme Policy 3 and the Logan Planning Scheme. So the key objective for us is to achieve that net gain in habitat and an overall no net loss of ecological value. So that's set within the planning scheme. So again, just highlighting it therefore needs to be very cleared land that can be revegetated and produce that long-term gain in habitat. There's some key factors in the legislation that relates to the localisation or the location of the offset, and that is in relation to the bioregions. So it generally has to be within the same bioregion or a nearby bioregion. We also need to deliver a like for like. So if a particular species of trees is cleared that relates to the regional ecosystem, then we need to plant similar trees that obviously need to be in the right place to grow. It's also looking at geographic location. So again, there is a prioritisation for something that is closer to the offset site. Bearing in mind, at a state level, there is preference for within the local government, but that is not guaranteed by state. And yes, some of the offsets are delivered well away from where the impact sites are. All right, so in order for council to deliver on our offsets and to make sure that we comply with all the legislation, council has adopted a methodology to prioritise the land acquisition for offsets. And there's 5 key principles that we must abide by. So first off, we want to aim for properties within the biodiversity corridor. So that's, the corridors that we really want to keep and we want to enhance over time. So that's providing that connectivity and that connection. The second principle is properties that share a boundary with an existing park. So again, it's creating better connectivity and connection for wildlife and for that movement, as well as, you know, for that overall habitat. It also comes into play when we look at cost effectiveness. So obviously, if we're already going out to maintain an existing park, then having one close nearby with access obviously helps reduce the ongoing maintenance cost. And prioritisation is given to environmental parks, but will tend towards other parks as well. Okay, the third principle is changing landscape. So this is really a weighting that gives some localisation to offset delivery that we're doing. So there is focus on offset sites that are near to major development areas, such as in emerging community zones. So just bear in mind that this is a geographic localisation. It is not related to political boundaries, but it does deliver on that geographic location. And that's in compliance with the legislation. Fourth principle is obviously, as I've said earlier, we really need to get that cleared area so we're delivering a better outcome in the long term than what was cleared. And value for money is the other principle. So obviously we must deliver the conservation outcome that has been impacted, the residual impact, with the money that we're collecting. And we want to make sure that that is affordable for everyone. So not just for council, but also for developers in terms of when they're offsetting. So we look at those fees and charges are set each year, and they're based on the true cost of delivering the offsets. So obviously that will tend towards larger blocks where you get economies of scale, and that means we can deliver more offsets with the funding and also reduces the long-term ongoing maintenance. All right, I'm going to hand over to Katie, who's just going to go through some of the achievements today with offsets.
Good morning. So to date, we've planted 77 hectares across 21 sites. Majority of those at the moment we've been using existing parkland that meets the rules that Trevor went through just before. But we've also bought 2 new properties. The one's listed there, but they're named Uawa Park in Buchan and Bars Hill in Bars Scrub, which was great to see some great purchases through that we can rehab. I believe all of you have a copy of the map within the committee report. On the screen is a simplified map. The green dots are those that we've currently planted, 21 sites across the city. The orange ones are those that are in the next committee report that you'll be going through. And no, the orange ones are the ones we purchased, the red ones are in the next committee. As you can see, there's a spread across the city, and all of them are within about 10 to 11 kilometres of the impact sites, which are the crosses. And all of our offset sites are on our website so the public can see what we are delivering across the city. Just some examples. Cedar Grove is our current largest site, so 33 hectares beside the Cedar Grove Environmental Park. It was planted in late 2019 during a drought period. It was tough work to start, but it has some amazing growth going on now, and it's also survived 2 floods. So it goes to show the resilience of planting in floodplains. Also gets a bit of nutrients from those floods as well. We have seen a change in wildlife there, especially in the bird species. That's usually what you see first, a change from paddock-based ones to more woodland. So it's great to be out there and see that change. The other one is a bit more of an urban site, South Quarter Park, which is about a 2-hectare site planted in late 2019 as well. It is going to create an ecosystem around an existing wetland, which is also going through that change and has also been flooded but has been resilient to that last one, which is great to see. And as I said, the bird species changed, but we also have started putting some fauna cameras out. Lucky enough to catch this koala down at Jody Park. It was planted in early March 2019, a little bit earlier, having some great growth, but just shows the importance of these areas throughout the city and providing that future habitat for him and his family.
Cool. Thanks, Katie. So that sort of has summarised the offsets land acquisition prioritisation methodology. The next two slides are just going to talk about where we're buying land for conservation purposes. So there is a similar adopted methodology for council to ensure we have a robust, transparent and accountable way in which we're prioritising land acquisitions. So conservation land is funded from the environmental levy, and it has similar principles to those that we've talked to. The key difference being that the land is not going to be cleared, it's going to be highly vegetated bushland and have really good habitat. But again, we're looking at ones that are in the corridor that connect with existing parks, preferably, and the weighting in the conservation land priorities does again favour larger properties with a lower per hectare cost. That just to demonstrate the value for money that we're achieving. So I guess in relation to that, there is an opportunity to review that weighting, particularly for conservation land, where the discretion is ours on how we prioritise what we acquire. And it may be that council would like to look at prioritising those smaller blocks, the remaining bushland blocks near the major development areas. There will obviously be an impact in terms of the per hectare cost and how much we can buy over the long term. But that is really the option that we've sort of identified through this review, rather than anything within the offsets, because that is highly regulated. As Katie said, we're already delivering within 11 Ks of an impact site, so it really is achieving a localised outcome in relation to those offsets. Thank you. I guess we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Trevor and Katie. I've got Councillor Lane, Councillor Kerensky, and Councillor Harrimeyer initiated this report. Do you have questions on it, Councillor Harrimeyer, as well? There we go. We'll do it in that order. Let's start.
Thanks very much through you, Mr. Chair. In the last committee round, we actually had a property that had or was classified as environmental offset receiving site, and there was an adjustment made to how much could be cleared of that site. What's the difference between an environmental offset receiving site and what we're proposing in this report? I'm just curious.
I can't comment too much on that specific example, but it was an offset receiving site under a previous offset framework or policy. Under the new policy and framework, those principles will prioritise the offset receiving sites. But yes, they're the same thing. Where we're delivering offsets, it's receiving the funding to put the plants in the ground on that site.
Thanks, but in the case of the last one, we actually removed part of the corridor because it wasn't protected. It was a receiving site. I just don't understand what the difference is. This one, is, you say, is fully protected, but that one wasn't. So I'm just curious as to what this means for council in terms of how many of these sites do we have and what it means for us going forward.
So in addition to being in a corridor, it will be changed. The receiving sites where we plant offsets will also be required to have a covenant or protection that protects it in perpetuity. And that goes on only after the offset area has been decided and planted.
So historical offset sites don't have that protection, or offset receiving sites? Sorry, I'm just confused by the terminology.
The case I think you're talking about was didn't actually end up being a receiving site.
Who wants to respond, Michael or the director?
I'll respond.
There we
I'll
go.
respond. That label that was given to that site is based on a very historical, localised structure plan, which was superseded by the current planning scheme. So that label given to that particular property as a receival site was based on a very historical, localised structure plan prior to the current planning scheme taking effect, which now gives the offset arrangements across the entire city. So whilst that label was given to it, it's effectively been removed from the site once the current planning scheme took effect in 2015.
So will any of these sites be able to be removed in future planning ones?
No, absolutely not, because offset sites that we deliver are either in council ownership and protected by a covenant, or if they are in private ownership, we'll have a governing covenant over it to protect them in perpetuity.
Thanks, that's all I want to know.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Councillor Herrenmeyer, Bradley, Mayor Power.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank the council officers for preparing this report and PowerPoint on this topic. I never thought I'd be so interested in localised purchasing and environmental offsets, but I am, because it's interesting, and especially for people in Parkridge and Logan Reserve, seeing so many trees get cut down, understanding that their government is doing something to focus on the environment is really good. Now, you mentioned on slide 16 and in page 7 of the report that council officers have framed language for a motion to do an additional review to look at this prioritisation methodology and investigate increasing the focus on acquiring land that's closer to development areas. Can you please explain that language? And I'd like to flag for the chair that I intend to move that the report is noted and this additional motion that's been drafted by council officers is included in the motion that I'll move. But can you please explain that language that you've framed up?
So just to bring us back to that first slide Trevor showed, so we need to be very clear the difference between offset and conservation. So we're not proposing that any changes can be or should be made to our current offsets methodology, because it is very much based in those legislative principles, complies with the outcomes required by the Logan Planning Scheme, and accordingly we don't consider that is a vehicle through which we can deliver that localised outcome that was sought. However, from the conservation acquisition methodology, if councillors would like us to increase the weighting that we apply on the proximity of purchasing properties, potential properties to current development areas, we can go away and do that piece of work to increase that particular component's weighting, which will then change the prioritisation of properties across the city. Bearing in mind that what that will do, though, is bring in smaller properties which are closer to development sites, which will cost more per unit area to purchase. So we will not get the size of properties on a unit basis that we would currently get under the current methodology.
And on that motion there doesn't make those changes. All it does will bring back information on if we want to make those changes.
Correct.
Thank you.
Sorry, through the chair. I just wanted to correct. The offset delivering is achieving localised delivery.
Thank you, Trevor.
On that, Mr. Chair, just to finish off my time, whether or not something's localised can really be boiled down to a spectrum. Now, I can say that this glass of water is local to me, and I can also say that that Jakarta is local to me in my region. It's a relative term. Now, what the expectation is from my community is that they don't feel like the current system is localised enough. So we can say it's localised, compared to the other side of the world it's localised, compared to how council has spent some other offset programs, it's localised, but in the community's eyes, and the feedback that I received from the community, is that they don't feel like it's localised enough. Just some clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Herrenmeyer. In those discussions with your community, have you spoken to them about the cost differential between how much more it would cost to buy land nearby that's got high development value? Have you made them aware of that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we were at a meeting at Claremont Resort where we discussed that.
This may have been a Dorothy Dixer.
Yeah, and what I would really like is to put forward this council officer motion, because we'll get some more information on what that cost difference will be, and that will allow some actual numbers to be involved.
To have that conversation with the community. Thank you. I have Councillor Bradley, Mayor Power.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm not really sure where this whole conversation was going, but my hand originally went up when Katie was talking about a particular slide and the X's. I was going to ask where that top X was for offset Are you able to maybe clarify it?
We can come back offline. So that
Yeah.
is obviously a development approval site. And we can provide that address at a
Okay,
later
thank
date.
you. If you could, that'd be awesome. Thank you. I suppose this is an area I'm quite passionate about. 16 plus years ago, I was given councils back then land acquisition for the whole of the city, which was a lot smaller than it is now. And there were a lot of parcels of land in the northern area of our city that were earmarked for acquisition, which never actually eventuated, and now have become very low priority compared to the rest of the city. And I noticed on one of the slides there was a focus on the river. Am I right in thinking that?
The river is a corridor, so yes, it would fit
Yeah.
within that biodiversity corridor priority.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, the focus has absolutely changed as a result of our city getting bigger. And I totally empathise with Councillor Hirameyer. Bare dirt is not a good look for anyone who wants to go to live in an area. But I suppose I'm open to whatever where this conversation goes. But this is definitely something I'm passionate about. Thank you.
No response there, Trevor? You look like you want to say something.
Respond.
He looks like you want to make a comment though.
Offsets, really prioritise that. Offsets are the last resort. So under the planning scheme, developers are required to avoid the impact and clearing wherever possible. If they can't avoid, then they must mitigate or reduce, and then only the residual impact is offset. Now, yeah, that's the intent.
Thank you, Trevor. Mayor Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a program obviously I fully support. Can't do enough. I think this is obviously just an information report in some of the respects, and obviously don't want this to seem to be this is all what we're doing. This is just one program. I know we've got Resilient Rivers, which is obviously doing a similar thing on our rivers, which we have too. What other programs do we have other than those two? Is there any? I would imagine we have other planting, but other programs as well. Because I'd hate to think that this is being televised, that this is all we're doing. We're doing a lot more than just this. This is obviously just one program. 100,000 trees sounds good, but I think we're doing a lot more than that overall. You like to comment?
Absolutely. This is just one of the programs. So there's a range of other programs, including our own river vision work. So the Logan and Albert have their own revisions and recovery plans. We also have a number of catchment plans. So the Oxley Creek, Upper Oxley Creek catchment plans, Slacks Creek, Scrubby Creek, and Beliva Creek all have revegetation works that is funded through the environmental levy and delivers probably double those numbers in terms of trees on ground.
And as you know, we won an award about a year ago or 18 months ago. Are we actually up for that type of award again? Are we trying to increase that? Or I know there was a significant improvement over that very short time, and it's a bit hard to duplicate that, but are we looking at going for that award again?
So I think are you talking about the green canopy, the increase in green canopy cover? Yeah, I don't know that it was necessarily an award. It's a methodology that's undertaken by an organisation just to measure green canopy across cities. So we just happen to do very well in that particular increase. So when they run that again in a couple of years, we'll be able to see where we are then. But given all the programs that we undertake, we expect that will be featured.
Okay, so that was some time ago. How many years? What, one every 4 or 5 years? Or?
I'd have to come back to you. I honestly don't know the frequency of that. Is it every 5 years? Every 5 years. So probably in the next couple of years. Like
okay,
I said,
it'll be interesting to get that result. Thank you.
And probably just to add to what Trevor said, let's not forget the enormous support we provide to all of our land for wildlife, voluntary conservation. We have 500-600 properties in that. How many? 800. Oh, we're up to 800. So there you go. 800 property owners in that program where they undertake, tree planting and things on their own properties to complement council's work.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Stemp.
Thank you, Mr Chair, through you. So this additional motion that's coming up today then, just so I understand, the idea is that we go back and change, you guys have a look at additional element or another, you look at an element within the methodology and you shift it, which will potentially reprioritise the current list of properties that we have. Is that correct? Is that what that would probably affect?
Yeah, so if we change the weighting, it will change the properties. Not, I don't know, it depends how drastically, but it will potentially bring some properties that aren't currently in our top 100 for acquisition for conservation purposes. It might bring some more properties into that. But again, we need to understand that it's just simply a list that we have to refer to if and when properties come up for sale. We do not, you know, go out and approach property owners necessarily saying, hey, we want to buy your property. So it's just, if it's on that list based on the methodology, then there's delegated authority for officers to pursue the acquisition of properties that are made available for sale, because we have to act quickly on these properties. And the way we've got it at the moment, it does work well, because we've bought like half a dozen properties over the last couple of years, given, you know, under that program.
Can I, sorry, just clarify? The report will just present those options, so it won't be a change in itself. That will come back for a resolution.
So we'll just give them a bit more of an understanding of the methodology if we shift this element. Is that correct?
And also probably some price path scenarios. So if we went that way, then we may end up with less and the impacts of that.
All right, thank you. Just want to clarify.
Councillor Hall.
At the moment, I've got quite a few residents that have properties. They're not super large properties, but they're larger than your smaller blocks. They're in bar scrub, and they're in the situation where they're caught in between two really heavily developed and developing areas in bar scrub. So they've got development above them, and they've got development directly below them, and they've got a busy road in front of them. These properties really have no tree coverage or anything on them. They're pretty much completely cleared properties, but they have so many overlays on their properties, it's not funny. They've got state overlays, they have federal overlays, they've got koala overlays. If you went to the property, you'd say there's no way a koala would go through this. Would this motion open it up for them to actually have their properties acquired by council, considering that there's so many overlays on them? So obviously there's some form of environmental significance to those properties not being able to later be developed. Would this actually make it easier for those properties to be acquired by council because of their proposed environmental significance? Because at the moment it's a situation that none of the developers will touch these properties because of the amount of overlay and the amount of work that would be required to actually shift them. That's the question.
Through Chair, I don't think it's a question we can actually answer without understanding the actual property. So whether it does or doesn't feature in our priority list of properties based on the methodology, it's hard to answer.
Would it be of any benefit to the owners of those properties to ask them to approach council if this is passed?
Again, I mean, any property owner can offer their property for sale, and if it is a property that features on our prioritisation list, then we will, you know, consider purchasing it. But let's not set any expectation, because it really depends on whether that property is on our prioritisation list.
Thank you. That answers my question. No further questions.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. And just wanted to, for the benefit of councillors whose first term this is, the methodology we use now actually lets us acquire properties, whereas in the past it was quite vexed. We would get to a point where councillors would have to decide property by property which one was better, which one was worse, and we had no context of what it was like in comparison to the rest of the city, which was really difficult. The good thing is that when we hear this thing about top 100 conservation and rehabilitation properties, that's a dynamic list. So every time a property is purchased on the top 100, the next property that was 101 pops up. So on a long enough timeline, with enough money, all properties that have any environmental or rehabilitation significance get purchased. But it just takes time to get there because we're trying to get the ones that are low-hanging fruit first, that are best bang for buck, that return the highest environmental value to the community and also get us the best use of our dollars, so we don't have to put up our environment levy any sooner than absolutely necessary. So that's where it exists at the moment. But that doesn't mean you can't change the weighting. And I think there's merit to reviewing that because this council hasn't seen those weightings and how they were put together. So even just seeing it gives you some context around how that could benefit either your residents who are stuck with a lot of overlays or your residents who would like to see more environmental land near the properties that are being developed. The officers have very kindly prepped the recommendation that's noted with the request for a further report. As Councillor Heremiah flagged that, I'm happy to test that first. Would anyone like to move the motion on the screen? I'll just give you a moment to read it. I know Councillor Heremiah is keen and Mr Mayor is happy to second, but I'll just give everyone a second to have a read of that. Excellent. I see lots of people's eyes on it. We've got one or two still scanning. Councillor Heremiah has moved the motion on the screen. Mr Mayor has seconded the motion on the screen. Can I please have a show of hands to see who supports this motion? Thank you. That is carried unanimously. Well done, councillors. We'll now move on to item 5.2, which is the proposed acquisition of land for environmental purposes, Cedarvale. This is a confidential report, or rather it has a confidential attachment. Do councillors wish to move into confidential to discuss this report, or are you happy to comment on the public sections of the report and vote on it as it stands? Would anyone like to move into confidential? No? Excellent. Michael, do you want to speak to the public sections of the report?
Oh, just quickly, Mr Chair, so without disclosing the property detail, it seeks council's endorsement to accept an offer to gift a property to council for conservation purposes. Given the property's attributes in that it shares a boundary with an existing council environmental park, has high ecological values and is located within a biodiversity corridor, we're recommending that council accept the offer and cover the associated transactional costs. And I also just need to advise of a administrative matter regarding the confidential attachment, in that it does contain a very small typo, but one that we need to correct through tabling an updated attachment.
No dramas at all. So
in terms of
we'll begin by tabling the updated confidential attachment. The motion is on the screen. Can someone please move that for me? Thank you, Councillor Russell. It's a procedural motion, so I don't need a seconder. All those in favour, please show your hand. It just changes the address.
Yeah, there was a number missing from the address. That's all. Yeah.
Pretty important that you're talking about the right property, but a pretty minor mistake nonetheless. Councillor Bannon, do you vote in favour of that, or are you? Yep, sweet. All in favour. Carried unanimously. Thank you very much, councillors. Councillors, we'll now put the motion on the screen unless there are any questions for Michael about this report. No? Excellent. The motion for the acquisition is on the screen. Can I have someone move that motion, please? Thank you, Councillor Bannon, seconded by Councillor Stemp. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. This is how you move through an agenda, people.
Mr Chair, in regards to that, are we going to send some sort of letter of thanks for that?
Certainly.
Okay. All right. Yep. Please do.
Yep, no problems whatsoever. That shall be done, Mr Mayor. Now we move on to item 5.3, proposed environmental offsets on council managed land. I believe, Trevor, you're going to speak to this one?
Certainly, through the chair. Thank you. So, yeah, really excited to present the next list of proposed sites for replanting, which is funded through the Environmental Offsets Reserve funds. All these are existing council-owned parks and reserves, and stakeholder engagement has confirmed that they are suitable for replanting and will not impact any recreational or other priorities for council. All divisional councillors were engaged and have supported the planting, so I'm happy to take questions.
Any questions, councillors? Oh, Councillor Herrmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've had a look through the report, and I understand that in this reserve, there's about $14 million just underneath it in the environmental offset constrained income reserve. And then the question that came to my mind is, what will be the total cost of establishing, maintaining, and protecting these sites?
So what we currently budget is around 120 per hectare for 10 years of maintenance for the revegetation. So it would be a case of timesing the hectares by that amount is what we would anticipate these particular ones will cost. The remaining reserve is, yes, will be spent on acquiring land and doing further revegetation.
Do we have the technology to make those calculations now?
Sure.
Is the technology you're referring to a calculator, Councillor Herrmeyer? just for clarity for those playing at home.
So currently,
131.
Would you like to hum a jaunty elevator music tune for me, Councillor Herrmeyer, while we wait?
so we have a maximum of 3.4 million.
And was that over 10 years?
So that pays for maintenance over 7 to 10 years to ensure until the trees get to a state where they're pretty much self-sustaining.
Great. So $3.4 million over 7 to 10 years, and that's out of this $14 million in the constrained income reserve.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Herrmeyer. Any further questions from any other councillors? Councillor Murphy has indicated she would like to move the motion. Would someone like to second the motion? Thank you, Councillor Karansky. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you very much, councillors. That has been carried unanimously. That brings us to the end of Michael Asnakar's report as the Health, Environment and Waste Manager. Michael, do you have any general business for us?
No, Mr. Chair.
Councillors, do you have any general business for Michael? Councillor Lane does.
Thanks very much through you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say a big thanks. The warm welcome that you gave to the Sunshine Coast Regional Council members who came down to have a look at our facilities and what we do in Logan was really appreciated. They loved hearing your knowledge and how we're working with other councils on improving outcomes in that area. So thanks very much to you and your team.
Thanks, Councillor Lane. Well, Trevor looks like he wants to have some GB.
Sorry, just wanted to remind the councillors that the World Environment Day school poster competition is open until the 31st of March. If you really encourage our primary school students to prepare a poster that is environmental themed, and they go into the draw judging for some fantastic prizes. Thank you.
Thank you for that timely reminder. Any further GB councillors? No? Thank you, gentlemen. And Katie, you can head back to work. Next, councillors, we have item 5.4, which is MCUI 18/2021, proposed material change of use for a childcare centre at 5 Montessa Street, Cornubia. The Development Assessment Manager, Mr. Stephen Ball, and his Program Leader, Justin Bajour, will speak to the report. And you've got a PowerPoint presentation you'd like up on the screen? Please stand by.
Through the Chair, Council officers are recommending refusal of a proposed childcare centre at 5 Montessa Street, Cornubia. The subject site is zoned in the suburban precinct of a low-density residential zone where a childcare centre is impact accessible. The site sits just to the south of Beenleigh-Redland Bay Road and is currently improved by a single dwelling. The proposed childcare centre will be 2 stories, accommodate 85 children and 13 employees. It makes provision for 25 car parking spaces and seeks to operate from 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. Monday to Friday. As the application was impact accessible, it underwent public notification for 15 business days. 30 submissions were received from the community, 1 in support, 16 objections, and 13 of those submissions were not properly made. The key concerns raised in those submissions were around traffic and congestion as a result of the childcare centre, the design and character of the centre, lack of need, concern around potential access to Tristania Street, concern around the landscaping species proposed and identified on the plan, and also a lack of NBN capacity. So council officers are recommending refusal of the application based on it does not meet local need and will adversely impact other childcare centres in the area. Also, the impact on character, the adverse impact on character and the lack of residential built form that is proposed as part of this childcare centre that you can see in those elevations there to the right of screen. The other reasons for refusal are also the applicant has inadequately addressed the impacts on amenity, particularly noise, and also the landslide hazard and steep slopes risk present on site. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Justin. Does the Divisional Council want to speak last? I'll just check to see if any other councillors have any questions on this one. I just have one question, Justin. Would we normally expect to see a childcare centre in a residential setting like this? Hey, look, triggered.
Through the Chair, childcare centres are listed as code accessible in our centres and mixed use zones, so that's where we try and concentrate our childcare centres. That being said, council officers have approved childcare centres in residential areas where there is a local need, where it fits into the character of the area, and also where the amenity impacts can be addressed. So to answer your question, in some instances, yes, we will find a childcare centre in a residential area, typically close to a school.
That was my next question. Does being close to a school impact that? And there's obviously no school close to this one. There's a school nearby, but it's not in direct contact. Okay. Just trying to understand the differentiation between this and other items that councillors have seen approved. Councillor Lane, I triggered you, so I'll give you an
Thank you very much,
opportunity to
Mr.
speak.
Chair.
Oh,
Poke
and
the
Councillor
bear.
Bradley.
Poke the bear. So I asked a question in the lead up to this council meeting about the demographics of the area. My understanding was in an area like mine where childcare centres pop up every other day of the week in a residential neighbourhood, that we actually have a greater need, and the percentage of people who are of child rearing age is much higher than it is in Cornubia. Is that correct?
Through the Chair, I can't comment for the specific need in Woodridge. However, as part of the assessment of an application for a childcare centre in your division, it would take into account the demographics of the area, and the demand may in fact be greater in your area, Councillor.
No worries, but in Cornubia those numbers are substantially lower where this is proposed to go.
Through the Chair, yes, there are also 14 childcare centres in this catchment trade area, so the demand isn't there for this particular childcare centre.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Councillor Bradley?
I was just going to say that there are 2 childcare centres in Wendron Street which council refused and went to court, etc. But I'm supportive of what the officers recommend.
Good to hear, Councillor Bradley. I might give the Divisional Council the opportunity to move it, but I'm happy to take it as a second. Mr Mayor.
Look, I just want to say through the Chair, I know this area very, very well, and it is an ageing area, and I believe that certainly the officers have got it right in regard to the need. I wouldn't imagine there'd be a big need for a childcare centre in there. It's an ageing community, and of course the surrounding areas is pretty much the same. I support the officers on this.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Heremiah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also support the officers with the information in front of me. A quick question, if we can get an email sent to me about it, is that I'm confused when it comes to how council, which is a government, assesses the demand and need of a private market, which is childcares. Because we say there's no need for it and there's no demand, yet each childcare offers a different product. So one childcare can offer a different menu than a different childcare and can have different unique selling points. So it seems, I'm interested in understanding how does council determine not only those trade areas, but also demand for an establishment that we don't know the product it's selling. So could I please get some information on that sent through?
Happy to do so.
He can answer it now.
Equally happy to comment now.
Yeah,
So childcare centre, through the chair, childcare centres are code accessible, as I stated before, in our mixed use zones and our centre zones. So we don't review the economic merits behind the childcare centre in those areas, in particular need. It's when a childcare centre is proposed in a residential area that our planning scheme provides a test in the overall outcomes, which talks about it may be acceptable subject to a local need being there. Because of that test, that's why we engage in an economic peer report. So the applicant prepares an economic report which studies the demand for that local centre, takes into account a whole range of things, and trade areas are quite, I'm not an expert on the economics, but the trade areas are typically for a local need a 5,000 to 10,000 person catchment. The trade area on this application is in excess of 30,000 to try and broaden the demand for this particular centre. So it's when we're assessing applications that are in a residential area that we start to look at the economics and need, because we also need to ensure that we can protect the amenity and the character of the area as well. But I'm more than happy to send through more information around the economic report and how it's prepared. And
that would be really great, because you see different sort of childcares having different offerings. For example, a big trend is bush kindies, and bush kindies aren't necessarily a local product. People travel many kilometres to go to a specific type of childcare. So yeah, just interested to see that process and understand it a bit more.
Great question, Councillor Herrenmeyer, because it points directly to the planning scheme where it's just for impact accessible, so outside of those code accessible areas, we want it to be very, very local. So you're right, the product could be something that would attract people from far away, but the planning scheme says that product shouldn't be in a residential area. It should be in a centre and one of the other areas where it's code accessible, because it'd be perfectly welcome there. Does that make sense? But yeah, it's a great question, because it helps you understand where the officers are coming from and why they've supported refusal. Councillor Stemp, you are the divisional councillor, and I don't have any other questions from any other councillors, so you can close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Look, I just wanted to thank the officers for bringing this report forward. It was very comprehensive and covered off all the things that my community was certainly concerned about. They brought this, as soon as this development hit PD Hub, I was getting messages, and there was 140 comments on social media within a couple of days. So there were a lot of concerns raised, and the 29 official objections that went through. I just want to mention that obviously there's 340 homes already in this estate with one entry and exit point and a very, very busy intersection. So I already get complaints from residents trying to get in and out of the estate. So that was certainly their biggest concern. And at the end of the day, I appreciate all the work done by the officers, and would like to move the report when ready. Thank you.
Very happy for you to move the report. Councillor Hall. The divisional councillor gets to wrap up, and then someone throws in a bomb. Very briefly, please, Councillor Hall.
Sorry, I was triggered. So what is the lesson to learn from this? Obviously, the person who's put in this application, they would have done their research on this, right? Like, why is it the case that they've gotten to the stage where they've purchased the property, they've put in the application for it, and it's been knocked back? Like, where is the lesson for this? Is it the case that they should have spoken to council before even looking at buying the property, or?
No, they've been speaking to council as part of the application process, and they would have been told the likelihood of success. Did they have a pre-lodgement meeting?
through the chair, I can't see that they've had a pre-lodgement meeting. That would always be our first advice, is done to take a pre-lodgement meeting that's free. But equally, as the chair has mentioned throughout, once the application was lodged, we were very clear that we weren't supportive of it, and that's continued through the assessment.
So really the lesson from this is, if you're looking at acquiring property to do some type of business in Logan, have a pre-lodgement meeting with council first, because otherwise you may end up in this situation where you put a lot of money into this property to go forward, and it doesn't end up happening simply because you didn't have the conversations with council. I'm going to abstain from the vote on this one, simply because I probably believe that these people have done a lot of research as to the needs in that area, and there's probably a great need for their style of daycare in this area anyway. I know, I recognise the company that's doing this, and they have a daycare in my area, which is a world apart from anything that I've ever seen in terms of being a daycare. So I actually think this is probably a missed opportunity for some of the younger people in that area, because I reckon that daycare probably provides a great benefit, does in my area. But yeah, I think they probably lacked in their processes in towards what they should have done before actually making the application for it. But I'm going to abstain from this vote. Thank you.
No worries, thank you, Councillor Hall. And yeah, the quality, no one's questioning the quality of the childcare provider or anything like that. It's just the location in a residential setting conflicts with the planning scheme. And maybe they thought they could overcome that, but the officers don't agree with the application aligning with the planning scheme, which is why they've supported refusal. Mr Mayor, you wanted to chip in
thanks,
as well?
Mr Chair. Look, what I wanted to do is obviously point out that all the applications we normally get in residential areas, I've never seen one that's affected so many local houses. If you look, there's about 7 or 8 actually properties that this intercepts right in the middle of housing development. Normally you get 1 or 2 neighbours maybe on the corner or such. This, I again agree with the officers, it will interrupt that community housing, and I think this is what residents are looking for. They're looking for a council that's going to make decisions that not just, respect the zoning on that area. And I'm sure that no one that bought houses in that area, about 8 houses, would have expected a childcare centre as big as that, right in the middle of that suburban area. That's just crazy. I would have thought that if I was putting that in, I would have thought this is a very iffy application compared to what I've seen come through in the last 20 years here. To me, it doesn't fit the way it does, and it would certainly be impacting on a lot of residents.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And to Mr Mayor's point and to Councillor Hall's point, if councillors vote to support refusal today, what is the likelihood of us being able to defend this in court if there's an intention to appeal?
Through the chair, officers wouldn't recommend a refusal if we didn't think we could withstand an appeal and defend that appeal.
Thank you very much. Councillors, I have to table the PowerPoint presentation before we move on to the recommendation. So there's a motion on the screen for that. Councillor Stemp has moved that motion. I do not need a seconder because it is a procedural motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. This is for the tabling of the presentation, Councillor Hall. That has been supported unanimously. Now we will move on to the decision, or recommendation I should say, for the report itself. Councillors, the recommendation is on the screen. Councillor Stemp has moved, and from memory, Councillor Bradley wanted to second that motion. Could all councillors in favour please raise their hand? Thank you, councillors. That has been carried with the exception of Councillor Hall. How do you vote, Councillor Hall?
Abstain.
And would you like to put your reason on the record for the minute clerks?
Yes, this is one of the very few companies that provides daycare that teach young people about environmental awareness, and I'm always supportive of daycares that do that. So for that reason, I think the community's missing out on something. So,
thank you, Councillor Hall. That'll be noted in the minutes. Councillors, we have one report remaining, and it's, wait, before we do that, Stephen, do you have any general business for us?
Through the chair, no, I don't.
Do any councillors have any general business for the Development Assessment Manager or his excellent program leader? No? Thank you, gentlemen. Great work. No problems. We'll now move on to item 5.5, which is the Invest Logan update. I invite the Director of Organisational Services, Mr. Robert Strachan, and the Director for Stratton Sustainability, Dave Hanson, to present the report. Councillors, this is a confidential report. Before we move into you do not have to move into confidential to discuss it, but if you'd like to discuss any of the items that are confidential in the report, you will have to move into confidential. Would anyone like to move into confidential for this item? Moved by Councillor Wilcox, seconded by Councillor Bradley. There will be a motion on the screen shortly. The reason that we would need to move into confidential is under section 254J3, negotiations relating to a commercial matter involving the local government for which public discussion would be likely to prejudice the interests of the local government. That has been moved and seconded. Can I have a show of hands who would like to move into confidential, please? That has been carried unanimously. Thank you very much, councillors. We will now move into confidential session. I would ask
goosebumps on my body come alive. Skin on my skin, oh God. Don't know where you end, I start. If this is a dream, don't wake me up. Before you stop, before the curtains close, can I just ask you if you wanna take me home? 'Cause I'm away and need something to hold. Can I just ask you if you wanna take me home? Take me home. Take me home. Take me home. So if you wanna take me home. Think there's something that you're trying to hold inside. But you're safe with me, just look into my eyes. Skin on my skin, oh God. Don't know where you end, I start. If this is a dream, don't wake me up. Before you stop, before the curtains close, can I just ask you if you wanna take me home? 'Cause I'm away and need something to hold. Can I just ask you if you wanna take me home? Take me home. Take Yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am. Yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am. Yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am. Yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am. Who you calling wanna be? You thought I would forget. Won't take your word for it. You think I think phonetically. You thought I would forget. Won't take your word for it. And it pains me to believe in you and everything you said I thought was true. And I reminisce your foolish shit. Tell me that I'm not ahead of you. Yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am. Yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am. Yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am. Yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am. I'll take advice happily. You're trying to destroy me. You want the worst from me. Don't you try and get the best of me. You're trying to destroy me. You want the worst from me. And it pains me to believe in you and everything you said I thought was true. And I reminisce your foolish shit. Tell me that I'm not ahead of you. Yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am. Yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am. Yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am. Yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am. Go ahead, go and tell me I'm not. Cause you thought that I would come back feeling lost and distraught. But I'm not. Sticky criticism, some places where people listen. I won't bother copping shit from someone who just wants a vision. Yes, I am, yes, I can, and I will on demand. I got the world in my hands, and I still got bigger plans. See, you're having trouble with your own shoes to fill. You think I can't go up your size, but just watch and I will. Yes, I am, yes, I am. Hey, yes, I am, yes, I am, I am, I am. Yes, I am. Yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am. Yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am. Yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am. Yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am. Rise and shine, see that light coming through the window pane. No more rain, no, no. This is the summer of love. You and me set free, gonna have fun. Here it comes. It's another sunny day. Hey, take a look, it's amazing. Let's get moving, what you say? Hey, time isn't wasting. I'm alive under skies, a bird that took flight under the sun. Feel my delight. Rise and shine, see that light coming through the window pane. No more rain, no, no. This is the summer of love. You and me set free, gonna have fun. Here it comes. It's another sunny day. Hey, take a look, it's amazing. Let's get moving, what you say? Hey, time isn't wasting. flight under the sun. Feel my delight.
ธอเคยเป็นบ้างไหมที่ใจตรงนี้ไม่มีพลังเธอเคยรู้สึกไหมบางครั้งหัวใจก็สิ้นหวังบางคนมีความฝันแต่มันไม่เป็นไปแบบนั้นเริ่มค่อยๆหมดหวังชีวิตของคนก็เท่านั้นหมดหวังสิ้นหวังคำเหล่านี้ที่มันไม่ดีกับตัวฉันคอยย้ำว่ามีหวังพูดซ้ำๆย้ำกับตัวเองลองอีกครั้งมันจะยากเท่าไรและเราจะยังสู้ไปถ้ามันต้องเหนื่อยเท่าไรต้องคิดว่าเราทำได้ต่อให้หนทางไกลล้มลุกคลุกคลานมากมายแต่สุดท้ายของคนต้องเดินรนสู่ต่อไปต้องเดินรนสู่ต่อไปต้องเดินรนสู่ต่อไปต้องเดินรนสู่ต่อไปคนเรามีชีวิตและมีเวลาเท่ากันแต่เราจะใช้ตรงนั้นให้มันมีค่าเท่าไรบางคนเริ่มจากศูนย์เพื่อไปให้ถึงเส้นชัยเราคงขาดไม่ได้คือหัวใจที่มีพลังหมดหวังสิ้นหวังคำเหล่านี้ที่มันไม่ดีกับตัวฉันคอยย้ำว่ามีหวังพูดซ้ำๆย้ำกับตัวเองลองอีกครั้งมันจะยากเท่าไรและเราจะยังสู้ไปถ้ามันต้องเหนื่อยเท่าไรต้องคิดว่าเราทำได้ต่อให้หนทางไกลล้มลุกคลุกคลานมากมายแต่สุดท้ายของคนต้องดิ้นรนสู้ต่อไปมันจะยากเท่าไรและเราจะยังสู้ไปถ้ามันต้องเหนื่อยเท่าไรต้องคิดว่าเราทำได้ต่อให้หนทางไกลล้มลุกคลุกคลานมากมายแต่สุดท้ายของคนต้องดิ้นรนสู้ต่อไปต้องดิ้นรนสู้ต่อไปต้องดิ้นรนสู้ต่อไปต้องดิ้นรนสู้ต่อไปต้องดิ้นรนสู้ต่อไปต้องดิ้นรนสู้ต่อไปต้องดิ้นรนสู้ต่อไปต้องดิ้นรนสู้ต่อไป
Yes I am, yes I am, yes I am, yes I am. Yes I am, yes I am, yes I am, yes I am. Yes I am, yes I am, yes I am, yes I am. Yes I am, yes I am, yes I am, yes I am. Who you calling wanna be? You thought I would forget. Won't take your word for it. You think I think phonetically. You thought I would forget. Won't take your word for it. And it pains me to believe in you and everything you said I thought was true. And I reminisce your foolish shit. Tell me that I'm not ahead of you. Yes I am, yes I am, yes I am, yes I am. Yes I am, yes I am, yes I am, yes I am. Yes I am, yes I am, yes I am, yes I am. Yes I am, yes I am, yes I am, yes I am. I'll take advice happily. You're trying to destroy me. You want the worst from me. Don't you try and get the best of me. You're trying to destroy me. You want the worst from me. And it pains me to believe in you and everything you said I thought was true. And I reminisce your foolish shit. Tell me that I'm not ahead of you. Yes I am, yes I am, yes I am, yes I am. Yes I am, yes I am, yes I am, yes I am. Yes I am, yes I am, yes I am, yes I am. Yes I am, yes I am, yes I am, yes I am. Go ahead, go and tell me I'm not. Cause you thought that I would come back feeling lost and distraught. But I'm not. Sticky criticism, some places where people listen. I won't bother copping shit from someone who just wants a vision. Yes I am, yes I can, and I will on demand. I got the world in my hands and I still got bigger plans. See you're having trouble with your own shoes to fill. You think I can't go up your size, but just watch and I will. Yes I am, yes I am. Hey, yes I am, yes I am, I am, I am. Yes I am, yes I am, yes I am, yes I am, yes I am. Yes I am, yes I am, yes I am, yes I am. Yes I am, yes I am, yes I am, yes I am. Yes I am, yes I am, yes I am, yes I am. Yes I am, yes I am, yes I am, yes I am. Baby.
Rise and shine, see that light coming through the window pane. No more rain, nope, nope. This is the summer of love. You and me set free, gonna have fun. Here it comes. It's another sunny day. Hey, take a look, it's amazing. Let's get moving, won't you say? Hey, time isn't wasting. I'm alive under skies, a bird that took flight under the sun. Feel my delight. Rise and shine, see that light coming through the window pane. No more rain, nope, nope. This is the summer of love. You and me set free, gonna have fun. Here it comes. It's another sunny day. Hey, take a look, it's amazing. Let's get moving, won't you say? Hey, time isn't wasting. flight under the sun. Feel my delight.
ว่าเราทำได้ต่อให้หนทางไกลล้มลุกคลุกคลานมากมายแต่สุดท้ายของคนต้องเดินรนสู่ต่อไปต้องเดินรนสู่ต่อไปต้องเดินรนสู่ต่อไปต้องเดินรนสู่ต่อไปคนเรามีชีวิตและมีเวลาเท่ากันแต่เราจะใช้ตรงนั้นให้มันมีค่าเท่าไหร่บางคนเริ่มจากศูนย์เพื่อไปให้ถึงเส้นชัยเราคงขาดไม่ได้คือหัวใจที่มีพลังหมดหวังสิ้นหวังคำเหล่านี้ที่มันไม่ดีกับตัวฉันคอยย้ำว่ามีหวังพูดซ้ำๆย้ำกับตัวเองลองอีกครั้งมันจะยากเท่าไรและเราจะยังสู้ไปถ้ามันต้องเหนื่อยเท่าไรต้องคิดว่าเราทำได้ต่อให้หนทางไกลล้มลุกคลุกคลานมากมายแต่สุดท้ายของคนต้องดิ้นรนสู้ต่อไปมันจะยากเท่าไรและเราจะยังสู้ไปถ้ามันต้องเหนื่อยเท่าไรต้องคิดว่าเราทำได้ต่อให้หนทางไกลล้มลุกคลุกคลานมากมายแต่สุดท้ายของคนต้องดิ้นรนสู้ต่อไปต้องดิ้นรนสู้ต่อไปต้องดิ้นรนสู้ต่อไปต้องดิ้นรนสู้ต่อไปต้องดิ้นรนสู้ต่อไปต้องดิ้นรนสู้ต่อไปต้องดิ้นรนสู้ต่อไปต้องดิ้นรนสู้ต่อไป
And I told
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for your patience if you're watching live, and we will now put a motion on the screen after an excellent debate by councillors. Thank you for the questions and for the informative answers by the officers. Councillors, you have before you an amended recommendation. Please review that recommendation before I put the vote to see who will move the recommendation. Would someone like to move this recommendation? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Would someone like to second? Thank you, Councillor Bennon. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried 7-6. I'm going to go around the room and ask each councillor how they voted. Mr. Mayor? Councillor Bradley?
Abstain, thank you.
Councillor Lane?
Against.
Councillor Russell?
For.
Councillor Karansky?
For.
Councillor Hall?
For.
Councillor Fraser?
For.
Councillor Heremiah?
For.
Councillor Bennon?
For.
Councillor Stemp?
Abstain.
Councillor Wilcox?
Against.
Councillor Murphy?
Against.
And Councillor Raven is abstain. Would any councillors who abstain like to provide a reason? No? Excellent. Did you abstain? Oh, you did abstain. You would like to provide a reason for the record?
Yeah, I would have supported the original recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Councillors, that motion has been carried 7-6 as recorded by the minute clerks. Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of the reports in the agenda. I do have Dave Long-Dave, the Manager of Economic Development and Strategy, Dave Radich, come to the table for some general business items. There are 2 general business items that have been circulated by councillors. Thank you for providing them prior to the committee. It makes it much easier for the minute clerks and for the staff. I'll start with Councillor Heremiah's motion, I believe. That's the first one. Yep. I'll put it on the screen and then ask Councillor Heremiah to speak to his general business item. Councillor Heremiah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Oh, Mr. Chair. Sorry, Mr. Chair, for the record. Today, I'd like to put forward a motion, and this motion is about investigating a solution to levelling the playing field when it comes to duplexes in our growing area. Over the past couple of months, I've been door knocking Logan Reserve, and one street in Logan Reserve is called Miramax Place. And when you walk down Miramax Place, as I've done, you'll see that there's over 24 duplexes on about 300 to 400 square metre blocks, and they're all on this one street, 24 duplexes. And many of these properties are owned by investors, and the people who live there said to me that they would love to own their half of the duplex one day. So I looked into it, and apparently under current planning rules, that's not possible for these specific properties in Logan Reserve on Miramax Place and many other streets in Logan Reserve that have been newly built, because these duplexes need to be sold on a single title. So both halves have to be sold. And experts say that this results in only investors purchasing these duplex because many people can't afford both halves. Now that knocks out lots of owner-occupiers in purchasing properties like that. And in some places in Queensland, you could purchase half of these duplexes, but not in Logan Reserve. And I think that matters because what we want is a mix. We want a mix of owner-occupiers and we want a mix of investors in our neighbourhoods. And right now we're not getting that diversity because so many of these properties are owned by investors. So we want a healthy diversity. And on a personal note, I'd love to see these people in these duplexes have the opportunity to purchase their half of the duplex, because their half is the half that matters. That half allows them to have housing stability, it allows them to own their housing future and build equity in their place of residence. But that's not happening right now. So what I'd like is for council to launch an investigation, just a for information investigation, into seeing if we can allow these duplexes to be registered on 2 separate titles. I think it's worthwhile because people who want to buy their half of the duplex should at least understand why they can't, and it's only an investigation. So I'd like to read out this motion, that the Director of Growth, Economy and Sustainability be requested to prepare a report to a future City Planning, Economic Development and Environment Committee outlining the feasibility and process associated with allowing the conversion of a dwelling house premises with a secondary dwelling into a dual occupancy premises in the context of the growth areas of our city. If anyone would like to come with me to go check out Mia Mac's place, the invite's always open, and I really look forward to seeing how this for information investigation report may turn out. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Heremiah. Just before we get stuck in, because I've got a few questions, I'll just get the Director to clarify some terminology around there.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we're crossing over between two different. The recommendation on the board is clear. I think we're talking about dwelling houses with secondary dwellings, investigating the potential to subdivide the secondary off from the primary dwelling and have two standalone dwelling houses. So that's what Councillor Heremiah is requesting we review. Just to be clear though, when we talk about duplexes, so that's the duplexes that you would all know as a well-established type of development, they already have separate titles, so that they're a fully independent living area under a different definition, which is a full dual occupancy. What Councillor Heremiah is talking about is separating the secondary dwelling from the primary dwelling house.
And can I just clarify, secondary dwelling as in granny flat, or secondary dwelling as in secondary dwelling or auxiliary unit, or both?
The recommendation just refers to secondary dwellings. So at the moment we would preclude auxiliary units. So would you like us to also include an assessment? Because in many instances they're a very similar product, and both are required to be retained on the same parent parcel at the moment. So I think if we did this, we would also do the auxiliary review as well.
Thank you for that. I'm happy with the motion as it is. If it does get up, which is just a for information, and council officers think it's appropriate to include some additional information, as you've mentioned, I wouldn't be against that. But I think the motion as it is gives council officers scope to also include additional information if they want.
Thank you, Councillor Heremiah. So I do have questions from councillors, but I want to give the team an opportunity to speak first. And Councillor Heremiah has pointed out that he's just asking for a for information report, but I know that Christian's team is a little bit under the pump at the moment. You've got a planning scheme that you're writing. So I don't want to load them up with work that needs to be done urgently. If it's the next council meeting you want this for, I'm not supportive of that, because between now and August, that team is under incredible stress to get the planning scheme to us to vote on, essentially. So I would prefer to push it back after that point so that some of that pressure has come off of them. But I also would just like to flag that it may be easier for you to just to incorporate these questions into the planning scheme, because that work is being done right now rather than starting a separate report process that will require an amendment later and so on and so forth. But I'll let the officers speak and then you can ask questions or clarify. Councillor Heremiah.
Through the Chair, I think that's perhaps one of the streets that we visited when we went on our tour, Councillor Heremiah. So I think it's a noble cause to look for affordable housing in our growth areas. There is a lot of investors in your area, Councillor Heremiah. There's also some great estates with owner occupiers. So we'll work with you through the ins and outs and see if we can look at how the planning scheme can reflect some of these changes that you're looking for, particularly around the secondary dwellings attached to the main house. Happy to look into that with a expected date, probably May, June. We could come back with your information report.
Thank you, Mr. Radich. I have Councillor Fraser, Lane, Bradley, Wilcox, Raven. Off you go.
So in this report, I guess you'll outline, like, if you've got a small block and you add another dwelling to it, if you make it into separate titles, would that cause issues to, like, the square meterage of the block, and would that maybe exclude people from being able to do that anyway, or would we be able to? Can we do anything in the planning scheme to allow such things? Because, you know, if you've got, say, 1,000 square metre block and you go, oh, I'm going to put a secondary dwelling here and turn it into another property, and then you go, oh, now I no longer have that secondary dwelling, now I'll just keep doing this until my blocks dwindle down to 200 square metres or something in the end. Is that, like, playing devil's advocate, I guess, but could that be the end game of some people's intent, I guess, if that was to come into effect?
So through the chair, I guess we'll look at this on a citywide basis because the planning scheme will have to cover the entire city if we get to amend any provisions. In saying that, when it comes to a primary dwelling with an existing secondary dwelling attached to it, it really depends on how big the property it was built on. So if it was 300 square metres, but the property was, the dwelling was all the way pushed to the back, you'd kind of get the situation where the secondary dwelling would be on 100 square metres and the primary dwelling would be on 200 square metres. So I guess we'll have to look at it at a case-by-case basis. We'll also need to look at how we could run services through there. Water, sewer, would need some easement. So I guess it's probably, let's have a look at it from a planning and feasibility approach.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Councillor Lane.
Thanks very much. I'm confused by the whole idea of this. So, Councillor Heremai, you spoke about duplexes. Duplexes, I would imagine, have their own driveway, they have their own carport or garage, and they're one property separated by a adjoining wall. And then we have the motion which actually covers granny flats and auxiliary units. Pardon?
Just granny flats.
So, well, that's even worse. So in my division, granny flats do nothing to benefit the local residents. Splitting those places up without carports, without frontage, without access to any sort of, you know, future aesthetically pleasing option is not okay with me. Looking at the idea of it, the duplexes are done the way in which they're done to protect the actual property owners, whoever they may be, because they share a conjoining wall, but they don't have a body corporate as such. Is that right, Mr. Adich?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Right. So in unit complexes, we have one rule, but if we actually extend this to granny flats, particularly in my division, Taluma Street, Oakland Avenue, it's a bloody great big mess. Excuse my language, but it's terrible. And I would hate to see us look at subdividing a 600 square block with a granny flat out the back into a 300 square and have two full families in those properties. That just, no, it doesn't cut it with me, and I can't support this motion. I'm really sorry.
Everyone will directly reference you because it's your motion, so save your comments up for the end. Otherwise, we'll just bounce back and forth and it'll take a long time. But I've got you at the end, Councillor Heremai, so you can respond to all questions. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you. I originally was very supportive of what Councillor Heremai was talking about the duplexes, having lived in a duplex myself and not being able to get Australia Post delivered to the house because they had no concept of where you were actually living. And it boiled down to the title. That's what I was told anyway. So my question is, and if it was just referring to duplexes, I would support this. I'll just say that. My question, though, to officers, are there any other council areas in Queensland that actually you can have separate titles for duplexes? Is it possible?
Excuse me, through the chair. No, that's my understanding, and the key reason for that is the definition of secondary dwelling. It's given to us from the state, and it states that both dwellings must remain on one title.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Councillor Wilcox.
Thank you. Sorry, slightly confused as well. So for me, duplex townhouse is two houses, big double brick wall split down the middle. That's how I grew up as a teenager. Granny flat for me is a small house that's attached to a main house. So for me, that's not reading granny flat. Dual occupancy for me is a main house with a second house down the back of the block. Is that what that's saying?
Not at the moment. I think your intention, Councillor Heremai, is actually that says auxiliary units, because granny flats are owned by the same family members, they're not rented separately. So I think your intention with this is actually auxiliary units, not secondary dwellings. Okay. Because granny flat, and I'll let you respond. Go on, respond.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to clarify.
You finish, Councillor Wilcox, then I'll go to Councillor Heremai.
So if it is a secondary dwelling, so the main house at the front, second house at the back, this is something that I've discussed with the team over and over again, because having acreage and larger acreage for housing affordability, I've got lots of parents that would like to actually, you know, have a house at the back, but they want it on a separate title for all their kids and that sort of thing. So essentially, is this saying yes to do that, put it on separate titles, and it will also subdivide that block so that there's separate titles on that block?
I believe I do. So normal subdivision is what they call freehold subdivision. So when you go chop a block of land to two, that's it. This is a strata subdivision, so more conventional to units and duplexes. That's where it came from. So it would be a strata subdivision. So if that block of land was 300 square metres or a hectare, it wouldn't matter. If you had this granny flat, which is either detached or attached, it would be, as I understand it, up for grabs based on what's on the screen.
Okay, so long as for me it's a detached, not attached, because I don't understand how you could do it for an attached granny flat, but if it was a detached granny flat, secondary dwelling, one at the front, one at the back, you had access to get to both, services were at both. Essentially, I don't need services, they can put in their own sewage, solage, whatever, then yes, I would support this because I do have the growth, I have the growth area with greenfield out in Division 11. With people wanting to do this.
Through the chair, so we'll investigate both attached and detached, because there will be situations where you've got an existing house, it's got a granny flat attached to it, a secondary dwelling attached to it. What would it look like in that situation to get that onto a separate title? And some of the complexities around ones that are built already is you have to build a firewall between the two properties, so there need to be some retrofitting going on. But I think the scope of this for information report, which we bring back, will consider attached and detached.
Councillor Harrimeyer, Mayor, Councillor Russell, Councillor Raven, Mayor Power.
Thank you. I'd like to just run through a couple of things. When it comes to these housing products that a few people have asked questions about, you can go and look at them. You can Google it, and what you'll see is these houses are on streets, just a typical 400 square metre each block street. You have what I've been advised is a dwelling house premises with a secondary dwelling or an auxiliary unit. That's what the advice I received is. And a difficulty with this discussion is that we're using two different languages. The common vernacular would describe these properties as duplexes. You go down the street, there's two separate garage doors, there's two separate front doors, there's two separate families, yet in the planning world, that they're not called duplexes. Now, I think that that when it comes to different granny flats down the back of the house, all that's an interesting discussion. But what this is really focused on is looking into seeing if we can get these properties that act like duplexes to be able to be treated a bit more like duplexes. Now, is it saying yes to changing these things? Is it saying yes to changing the planning scheme and all these regulations? No. What it will do is serve as an actual document so we can have this discussion in an educated way. So that's the purpose of this report, to get feedback from council officers back. The issue has been raised in the community. People want to buy their half of these duplexes in Logan Reserve. My goal is to raise it, get some information back, and then we can have a debate on potential reforms. This isn't actually reforming anything. All this is doing is getting some information back. So I understand what the whole thing about concerns around granny flats. This isn't aimed at granny flats. This is aimed at properties that look like duplexes in Logan Reserve and act like them. And it's just for information.
Thank you, Councillor Harrimeyer. Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Chair. I put my hand down because I realised that this was something I could ask when the report came back, but I'm actually just burning to ask now. I wanted to know with the, so we're talking about a 400 square metre, and then once we separate that, we're talking about potentially two 200s then, is that correct?
Through the chair, that's a possible scenario, yes.
So is that a risk? Is that one of the things that would make this a concern?
Well, through the chair, just our initial thoughts were this is probably counterintuitive to what the Mayor put forward as part of the major amendment version 9 when we actually introduced minimum lot sizes.
Yeah.
So, but look, we'll come back with a report that discusses it. But again, it's really going to be on a site-by-site basis. And again, we're going to have to see if the state government will even let us do this. So we'll receive some feedback from the state government, see if this is even possible. But a situation could be you've got a primary house and a secondary dwelling attached to it. It's on 200 square metres, and then to subdivide it, you're ending up with a property that's 100 square metres, 100 square metres. So it is a case-by-case basis.
Okay. All right, thank you. I want to support it sounds like there's a good investigation to be done. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the debate.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. I have Councillor Raven, Mayor Power, Councillor Hall. So I'm not supportive of the For Information report, sorry, Councillor Heremiah, purely because I can see so many hairs on this before we even get to getting advice. And maybe that's just because I have similar areas to you where there's entire sections that are all OGS units. A lot of those are sub 300 square metres, which would result in like 150 in a 70 or a 120 block. They don't have front doors. They just have, the OGS unit just has a garage and a side gate. It's not what people would call a standalone dwelling or a standalone home. I admire your desire to rep your community, no problem with that, but I don't want to send the officers and the resources down the path of investigating this when I just off the top of my head, without getting into debate, I can see 6 or 7 reasons why it would break the planning scheme and create really undesirable outcomes long term. In the short term, it would do if it gets approved, it would do what you're trying to achieve, which is help people own their own home. That's what it sounds like. But in the long term, once it becomes an effort to just continually reduce the size of lots by building an auxiliary unit, then subdividing it, then building another auxiliary unit, and subdividing it, and building another, so I can just see so many challenges with implementing this well that I don't want to burn the officers' time. So I won't be supporting the For Information report. I completely encourage you to ask the officers to explore it offline so it's not as formal and doesn't require as much detail, but I can't back it in because I can just see so many problems before we even get to the work being done. Mr Mayor and then Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I won't step in line, sorry, I won't step in front of anyone with an inquiring mind. One thing that this council has had in the past was few too many councillors not being able to understand town planning issues. So the discussion for me is good discussion. Whether you actually agree with it or you don't agree with it, it's irrelevant. It's the direction that it's taking, we'll take it. The council's got a job. The first job is to represent their residents. He may not agree with it, but he still has to be seen to be doing his job. So I applaud the council for putting this up. I don't see any adverse out of this in that we have a report, we can discuss it, and you can, as first-term councillors, many of you, you'll learn more about where we get to on a planning scheme and the reasons why. So I will be supporting it. May not support the direction of Councillor Heremiah, but I acknowledge the fact that he has a job to do, represent his public, and I want to see that discussion take place.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Hall.
Look, I'm supportive of this motion because it does give us a better education as to what this is about. The thing is, though, I'm not supportive of the end result of what it may actually achieve or allow. I really don't encourage that style of dwelling in my community because I don't think it makes a great community. If you jam people in too tight, it's not a good community to live in. It creates the opposite effect. And the problem with this is it almost sets up like a gypsy law where you start with half the house, but end up, it may end up becoming, all right, so I've got these 2 rooms over here, which I could turn into a house. I'm going to divide that up and make a new dwelling as well. So it sets up the position of another standard where you're creating a gypsy law where you can just keep recreating the rules over and over again, which isn't a great thing. So no, I'm against gypsy law. So, but I will support this.
Councillors to refrain from the use of the word gypsy law. It's like Chinese whispers. We don't need to refer to anyone's race in relation to anything. Thank you. Councillor Heremiah, that's it. So you want to wrap up?
Thank you. I appreciate the discussion, and what I'd really like around this is a discussion based on evidence and a discussion based on facts from the experts. This motion isn't asking for any changes. This motion is asking for information, and I think when people in our city bring back legitimate concerns and they express to their councillor that they would love to purchase their property, but potentially council is the one getting in the way of it, and they just want council to look into it to see if it's possible, and council says no to information, I think that would not be a good outcome. And that's why I brought this today, because I know that it's a reasonable request. It may be complex and it may not be feasible, but let's at least get the experts to give us the information around it for this very legitimate concern that residents have. I actually agree with Councillor Hall when he talks about the housing products being built. On one street, I don't think there should be 24 duplexes in this environment. We've done really good things as this council to cut back on that. But that street's been built. Those duplexes are there. And unless there's major changes, they will be there for a long time. And the question is do we want those 24 duplexes to be held in majority investment hands, or do we want housing diversity in that street where there are some owner-occupiers in these duplexes? This motion isn't going to answer that, but this motion is going to get us more information and allow us to have more in-depth conversations. So it's not a radical change, and I'm happy to move it when appropriate.
Councillor Herrmeyer has moved the motion. I'm not going to take any more debate. He's articulated his position really well. Everybody else has articulated their position.
Second.
Thank you. Good.
Based on what the Mayor has said.
Thank you. Councillor Bradley has seconded the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That is carried. Councillors, please go around the room and state your position.
For.
Against?
For.
For.
Against?
For.
And I'm abstaining so I can put a reason on the record. I don't think it's a good use of staff resources, and your goals could be achieved without a report coming back to council. Though Councillor Herrmeyer's goals, I should say, can be achieved by coming back to council. Councillors, we have one more general business motion from Councillor Bradley.
And I want to applaud Councillor Herrmeyer for standing up for his community. It's very admirable.
Councillor Bradley, if you could speak to your report, that would be great.
So I asked for a recommendation, which hopefully will go on.
And it'll be up in a moment.
So obviously, you all know I've been working from home over the last wee while, looking at legal stuff, etc. And part of what I had to go through was the Springwood Implementation Plan from 2018. And in there, at least on page 4 of it says new Civic Park Town Square, short-term timing for the delivery or the action for that. And the start of this term in 2020, I asked for a report because my understanding from when I was previously a councillor last term, that it was earmarked, that Town Square was earmarked for 2020. And actually, I had actually written down in some of my notes 2019 to 2020. So hence why I asked for a report. That report, unfortunately, and I'm very grateful for the report, I will say that to the manager, but some of the interpretation of what actually transpired previously wasn't what I had in my notes and what I had in my recollection as well. But anyway, regardless, what came back from that was behind the scenes, some suggestions. I wasn't very supportive of the suggestions from the consultant, and when the new CEO started just over a year ago, I asked for assistance with him and the Mayor as well, trying to work a way forward. There is no council resolution on this. That's what concerns me. So that's why I'm asking for this report, because I may not be here one day.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, I'm going overseas on holidays for leave very shortly. I want to make sure this is dealt with.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Councillor Bannon had a question.
I've got a couple through the chair, probably to the director. So why does it have to have a council resolution on it? Like any for delivery to these things, wouldn't it just come to a budget to get it funded? So I'm not sure why it has to have a resolution and why. No, I'm asking him a question.
Through the chair, I think the purpose of the report, and happy to be corrected by Councillor Bradley, but the purpose of the report is to show the full history of how the town square, for want of a better term, has been referenced in our planning documents, our local government infrastructure plan, all of the interactions that we've had with Councillor Bradley and external consultants, scooping up the recommendations that were endorsed at the middle of last year around how the new planning scheme in 2025 would also deal with the Springwood Town Centre. We would have a report that just captures the lot, and that presents the view to the council. If then there's a desire to move on into a funding discussion, that would be a subsequent and separate piece. We would just deal with the history and where we currently stand.
The other question was, because we talked about the workload just before, and the one that Councillor Jeremiah got up, how are you going to go with the workload, having another report put on you when you've got the plan to come out in August?
Yeah, we've discussed that as a group. Councillor Bradley referenced the previous report, which would provide the starting point. My concern always is that we're not just aiming at the very next meeting, or putting a time frame on it, because we do have to be very sensitive to the amount of work going on at the moment. But I think that sort of May, June, Dave, shake your head, nod your head, that sort of time frame is doable for us.
And would Councillor Bradley be happy with that? Because the time frames would think me overloading them up when you're already busy, but does Councillor Bradley want this next meeting, or?
I'll get Councillor Bradley to lap back around the end like I did for Councillor
That's because that makes my decision whether Councillor Bradley wants this ASAP or...
Yep, she'll respond to your question after Councillor Lane has made her comments, and then Councillor Powell, so you'll get to wrap up.
Thanks very much. It says Springwood Town Square, not Springwood Town Centre. Is it square or centre that we're asking for the report on? Because I think they're two different things. Councillor Bradley has been a massive advocate for Springwood Town Centre and the civic park, and I saw the opening of the dog park recently, and various things which properties have been purchased. So is this new information, or is this just I don't know, putting it all, the old stuff together?
I'm pretty well versed in the Springwood Town Square, so that's how it's formally referred to. Springwood Town Square in 2009 master plan was listed as a good place to have lunch. Since then it has appeared in the local government infrastructure plan as an unfunded item. It was then moved to a publicly owned piece of land. The delivery options that we spoke about in the council workshops were that the town square would be delivered as part of the new planning scheme. So we have specific wording in a resolution of council. I'm not sure if you'll remember how we spoke about how the town square could be brought up in the local area plan. Christian's team now has drafted wording in the town square, in the local area plan, that talks about the importance of the town square. The size, which was agreed to by Councillor Bradley, is 2,000 square metre property. We've checked that with the development assessment team. They believe that the drafting of the draft scheme would give them the head of power to enter into an infrastructure agreement to deliver a town square as part of a development application that would happen in Springwood. So there has been quite a lot of work that has gone on.
Yep, that's the reason why I'm asking the question, because I know that it's been non-stop since we got in 2020, where Councillor Bradley's been advocating for this area. So you've got new stuff to add to this that is basically already half done. Seeing a way forward for this plan. That's what this is asking for. Is that right, Councillor Bradley?
I'll ask Councillor Bradley to respond at the end like I did with Councillor Jeremiah. Dave was just going to finish.
Through the chair, so there was some correspondence that was agreed to, so I guess the wording of how we would reference the town square in the Springwood local area plan that forms part of the new planning scheme. So the delivery options there are that a private developer will deliver the town square. There's a long history, so the report that we'll bring back will discuss that. So if you look at the wording, it talks about detailed options around the delivery of the town square. That could be as part of a development in Springwood. We've worked with DA. They're comfortable that they can negotiate an infrastructure agreement to deliver a town square in Springwood as part of a major development. But the other things would be working with the parks manager to deliver a town square too. So our EDNS's role in delivering a town square was we worked with Queensland Rail in Beenleigh to embellish the land for the Beenleigh town square, but that's the only town square in the city of Logan. This will be the second.
Thank you, Dave. Mayor Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Springwood is not a dirty word. It's not about speedboats. It's about opportunity, and it's about.
Oh, Mr. Mayor, nobody said that. Nobody
no,
said
but
that.
I'm just saying that there's been a lot of negativity about what's happened in the past. But the thing is, Springwood presents a lot of opportunities. As you know, the freeway is going through there, and there's going to be a number of properties that will be taken out by the state government. There's going to be some opportunities there. We've got the medical health hub finishing soon, I believe in a few months. So there are a lot of positive things happening in this area, or opportunities. I'd certainly like to get an update of what's happening and where we're going on this, because it is a large commercial centre in our city. It's on the freeway, it's pride of place, it's what a lot of people judge us by, is what they see. There's a lot of great businesses there, a lot of premium businesses there. So we should be, as a city, taking an interest in what's going on there. Again, I will not stand in the way of a councillor who's trying to do their job. The councillor's obviously under a lot of pressure from residents and so forth about what's going on there. That's your job. That is your job. Your job is to come in here and seek the answers for your residents, and I will not stand in the way of this, and I support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Bradley, you want to respond to the questions you asked?
Can you remind me what the questions were, please?
So timing, how quickly do you want it to come back? And then Councillor...
I won't be here in May.
You won't be here, so you want it after May, basically? Yep, and I think that's fine. Longer is better than shorter.
Yep.
And Councillor Lane, your question was, would you...
The naming, it is actually listed in there as Town Square.
Okay. No, you asked, would you be comfortable, it was a would you be comfortable question.
No, my question was actually around, is this a way forward? Is Councillor Bradley seeking a firm way forward in the planning of the Springwood Town Centre Square, whichever the case may be? And that's what this report does, which is already partially written.
There you go, Councillor Bradley. Oh, and
Can I respond to that? Thank you. For me, this is articulating it clearly, because that's the problem that has happened previously. Is things were decided, but it was so airy-fairy that it was the history has changed, as in the intention and what was articulated back then was changed in 2020. So I want to make sure it's documented. That's all.
And so is that the key difference between the previous report, this one, that everything is detailed in a full history and it's all there? And are you expecting options to come out of it about how to deliver it, or you just want a for information report?
My understanding, it is going in the planning scheme.
Yeah, okay, cool. So you're comfortable with how it gets delivered, you just want a history recorded somewhere?
Yeah.
All good. And to the Mayor's point, which he said twice now, he won't stand in the way of councillors asking for reports. I agree that reports that need to come before council to create like either a record in one spot, so it's easier to reference later for a future council, great. But we have other powers that let us get the information we need without making a report come to council. That's my concern sometimes, because reports can be expensive, 20 grand plus.
Are you suggesting that Springwood's not that important?
No, that's not what I'm saying at all.
Okay.
That's not what I'm saying at all. Because I'm happy, there's a difference between those two reports. I'm happy to support this one because it has a clear purpose that can't be achieved through another way, because you've tried in the past and it hasn't worked. Councillor Bradley would like to remove that recommendation if there's no further questions. Mr. Mayor has seconded it. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously with the exception of Councillor Wilcox. How do you vote?
Oh, against.
Thank you, Councillor Wilcox. Councillors, that brings us to the end of all pre-prepared GB and all reports. Do you have any further general business for Mr Radish? Mr Radish, do you have any general business for us?
No, I do not.
Nearly upgraded everybody to a councillor today, or downgraded a director, as the case may be. Thank you very much, councillors, for your patience and attention. I close the meeting at 12 o'clock exactly. The city infrastructure meeting will start at 12:10.